Okay, Gary is going to be a little late, we understand, so we're going to go ahead and open the meeting. We'll call this meeting to order. Pledge of Allegiance.
Yes, sir. If everybody will stand and join me, put your hand over your heart. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, staff, if you would like to make your presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Welcome to the City of Destin 2022 Budget Workshop number 2. And do I need the clicker? So just a reminder of the 2022 budget process. We started with the visioning session in January, moved on to the operational budget workshop on June 14th, and we are now at the July 12th capital budget workshop. In the near future, we'll be going into individual sessions with council for capital and operational budget overviews. That'll be the week of August 4. And hopefully we can get them done in 2 days. If not, we'll spread that out. From there, we will have an optional budget workshop number 3 on August the 9th. And then finally, we will go into the adoption of a balanced budget in the 2 September meetings. Any questions on that? Where do I need to point this at? Over there? All right. So the strategic planning review, as you know, we had that meeting in January 2021. Council participated. We went over that in the first workshop, and we got some more input during the first workshop, and staff has worked to implement those suggestions into a draft which is before you tonight for you to take a look at. Just a reminder real quick, we've changed the formatting on the strategic poster, which is this gadget right here that's easier if you read it in front of you on your paper. But in past years, we just ranked them from 1 to however many we had using various voting techniques during the budget or during the planning sessions. This year, we're moving to a little bit different way of categorizing these. We feel it's better use of the resources that we currently have available, and better defines how we will be moving forward with each of them. So there's 3 categories: critical priority, which basically is no matter what, we want to get this project finished. So this is council's highest objective. I mean, they want us to get it done no matter what. The middle or the second category is the important category, which most of ours are, and that's a priority that will or can have significant impact on performance. A good example of that would be our Compass program. The resources on these programs are fixed, and the variables could be the time, the due date, or the actual objectives. So it has some flexibility as far as getting it completed. And finally is our lowest priority, but it's still desirable priority, and it's a priority where both resources and time are variables. So that being said, the resources from a desirable priority may need to be taken to complete a critical priority. So that's why it's important that we fund them, because there has to be an alternative funding source if we need to push more money to the critical priorities. And so that's the approach we're taking now, and I think most of the staff is on board. We've taken a couple months to absorb it and digest it and work over the definitions, and I think it's going to work moving forward. It better aligns with our capital projects too, as you will see during Ms. Strickland's presentation. So we have the council objectives for FY 21-22 as revised, and this is still your document, but we did incorporate all the input we got during the last workshop, and we think we have got it to the point where you wanted to see it. If not, we will absolutely update it, and then we will bring this back at the next, hopefully at the next council meeting, so that we can formally adopt it after you hear the capital projects budget numbers. You should have a good idea if you're on board with the way these are lined up, because they will line up directly with the capital projects budget. So on critical priorities, we have the offering of livable wages and benefits to attract and maintain high caliber qualified staff. And so that's the no matter what category as of right now. Then we move to the important priorities. Right now we have the completion of the 2-lane crosstown connector, the public beachfront acquisition initiative, the undergrounding of utilities, and the Zerby Street Calhoun Avenue Phase 2, which is under the Marlar Bridge. Finally, we have the desirable category, which is the research and viability of the multi-use convention sports community center. This is strictly the Phase 1 feasibility study if we were to move forward with that. Ms. Strickland will have numbers for you to let you know how much we have set aside currently in the tentative budget for all of these. Also, annexation of incorporated enclaves. We've identified some areas and some staff has done some research, and we think we may have a new approach to getting some of these incorporated into the city. Not all of them, but some of the smaller areas. Also, left transit and trolley system under the desirable category, as well as the city marina Phase 1 feasibility study, and the ongoing improving of parking and exploration of parking options, including parking garages or additional surface parking. And finally, we have the beach renourishment planning and scheduling. So in most organizations, that would be the overview of the strategic plan. We've expanded ours just and wanted you to see where staff was at too, because some of the previous year's items have been incorporated into the management objectives and other staff areas. So if you look at the management objectives for 21-22, you'll see our critical priority is balancing the resources. That's the staffing, time, and money with the mandatory and non-mandatory function projects and tasks. I guess that directly aligns with the 3 categories we just talked about, because each one of those projects that we just talked about requires staffing, time, and money to complete them. So what our objective is to make sure that we are funneling the resources to the right places and not funneling them to pop-up projects unless it's justified by council vote. And then we're readjusting the priorities at that point. We also have funding sources for beach acquisitions as a major undertaking, and definitely funding sources for undergrounding utilities. Important priorities for the management objectives is development and implementation process being consistent and streamlined for the application of codes and procedures, streamline along with the streamlining of delivery vessel regulations and permitting, and along with prompt, consistent building permitting, all of these being tied to our new Compass program. Next up, we have improved communications with council, public, and staff. That's really ongoing every year. We have continuous improvement of contract management processes. That's been ongoing for the last 3 years. We have key functions and services where we want to continuously improve the effectiveness and efficiency of each of our key functions, and our staff has undertaken the task of defining all those key functions for their individual departments and divisions. And then lastly, we have under desirable priorities, establish park foundation to assist with the acquisitions, renovations, and maintenance of parks, recreation, and other leisure facilities. Under management in progress, so these are projects that have started and we want to continue with until completion. And there are some that are ongoing, like this first one is memorializing the institutional knowledge of the organization. As most of you are aware, over the last 3 years, we have lost a lot of our most senior employees, and with them went a lot of institutional knowledge, and we are undertaking the process of memorializing this knowledge so that future leaders in our organization will have access to that. We are planned for renewal and replacement of city facilities and infrastructures, and that's partially with the R&R funds. And then we want to monitor our Restore Act grants, which right now we have the Royal Melbourne grant and the Clement Taylor grants coming up. The important priorities include implementing enhanced signage control, also develop and implementing wayfinding programs, which a part of that is improving the city's gateways and possibly moving the welcome sign to the east side of the bridge if we can find an adequate location. Also want to update golf cart and low-speed vehicle rules, which is underway right now, as you know, and implement a roadway striping program, which I believe Mr. Burgess has got that implemented and is revising it each year now so that we will have all of our roads consistently restriped. We want to provide better training to our boards and committee members when they come on board, and then we want to improve sidewalks, make them wider, more walkable, and we're working on those. I think Calhoun Avenue was the last area where this was completed. Code is working on enforcing residential boat and RV parking regulations, and I think that was related to in the single-family areas. We have monitoring the beach cleaning with Okaloosa County, and I think staff has been doing that, and I believe the county has responded well since we started having regular communication with them about our expectations. And then finally, we have citywide development. Lastly, under desirable priorities, we have reestablished the environmental committee, which was dissolved a few years back when it became part of the environmental tree committee. And so we want to work on reestablishing that environmental committee for the city. Major projects over the next 5 years, critical priorities, implement and manage Compass software, continue that process. Continue the harbor. I'm sorry, thank you. You get it? Thank you, Webb. I'm using a different screen up here, so I can't see that far. I wish I could. Implementing the management and managing the Compass software, and then the harbor capacity study that Lewis and his crew are working on with the Army Corps of Engineers. That should be completed hopefully in about a year. The data from that will be used to make a lot of fact-based decisions, and I'm looking forward to having the data to base those decisions on. The land development code is currently being revised. The impact fee studies have been budgeted for, and we need to update those impact fees, as well as the building permit fee studies is budgeted for, and that is also something that we need to study and update those prices so that we can get to the point where we're breaking even there, and Ms. Strickland will discuss that in further detail. Under the important priorities, update the business tax receipt fee schedule and processes. The Compass system obviously is helping a great deal with the new applications. We're still working through some hiccups with previous holders of BTRs, and we'll continue to get those fixed as we move forward. We have the construction of Captain Royal Melbourne Heritage Park, which is finally underway. I didn't know if I would ever see it, but it is absolutely underway. And there's a foundation down there, and so we may get to see this sometime in the late fall, early winter stages of this year. Zerby Street, Calhoun Avenue Phase 2 is the design of pedestrian pathway under the Marlar Bridge. And we have a design firm working on that for us right now. We have Highway 98 median improvements projects, which will move forward later this year, managed through FDOT. We have Noriega Point Phase 3, the recreation components, which is the restrooms, pavilions, boardwalks, and some walkways down to the swim areas. That will take place later this fall into winter of this year. And then we're still waiting on the release of funds from ORAC for the renovation of Clement Taylor Park. We have the redevelopment of Joe's Bayou Recreation Area on the books, which the FDOT or FDEP is managing that project for us, and they will be going out for bids, design bids in the near future, and that will bring the 4 parcels of Joe's Bayou boat launch area, the old cement plant, the current Mattie Kelly Pier area, and then the current nature walk area all into one big recreation area with a walking path around the perimeter that we think we'll probably get a mile's worth of pathways out of that. So it should be a great feature for the city. Continuity of the streetlights. That's Michael's working hard to get all of our streetlights converted to LEDs. And then implementation and of the priorities of the stormwater improvement based on the stormwater master plan. And finally, we have the desirable priorities. Design and construct Gulf Power Easement Trail, Linear Park. We have very limited funding budgeted this year for some possible design work, and Ms. Strickland will talk on that. And then we have design and construct of the world-famous pickleball courts in Destin. So we haven't given up on that idea. We know you guys would like us to get those built for you. So that was a lot of information really fast, and I apologize for going so fast, but I think we captured where you wanted us to move things to from the last workshop. But if not, please individually, you can email me suggested changes, and we can implement those, bring them back then for an actual adoption at a voting council meeting. And I'd be happy to answer any questions on that.
I'd like to hear a little bit more from Crystal and funding and monies and how she sees what we have being allocated and where we might be able to take some.
And she is going to do that. She actually is going to finish up this workshop for us and has the remaining time to present all those facts for you. Yeah, please.
Are we recording this, like audio, video? Okay.
Good evening. So this is, the reason I asked for this draft poster to be put before you is because this is where we're matching our priorities to our money. That's the whole second half of this, this budget workshop. And we are open to suggestions if you think that we need to reprioritize something, if you think that we should change the funding levels for any of these projects. And you're going to see that the last couple slides, when I get towards the end, are going to, I'm just going to show the next 2 years. But first we're going to start with a general overview of capital budgeting, all the different types of restricted funds and other funds that we have that we apply for the capital budgets. And then we're going to see how well staff matched the priorities to what we're going to fund over the next couple of years. And we're going to actually have a discussion so I can, get the feedback from you again. I felt like at the last workshop it was really helpful to hear from you. So you also might remember that from the last workshop, I just love the saying, a budget is not just a collection of numbers, but an expression of our values and aspirations. So matching our funding to our priorities is the key of the evening. Am I pointing in the wrong direction, Webb? Okay. There we go. Okay. So again, this first slide, it's just a general overview of what we're looking at for next year. We're looking at spending approximately $16 million on capital projects next year. I've categorized them into 4 major categories. We have the council-directed, the renewal and replacement program, growth necessitated, and other capital projects. So first, we're going to go and review the different types of funding that I would apply to these types of projects, and then we'll get down into the actual details of each of these categories. So capital and capital improvement programming, most cities separate renewal and replacement, which is basically taking care of the assets that we have, versus capital improvements, which is expanding or building, adding additional assets and infrastructure. I wanted to go over a little bit about what a renewal and replacement fund is meant to be. It's not supposed to be confused with repairs and maintenance. This is where we tuck away money because we know one day we're going to have to replace the roof on this building. We know that we're going to have to paint the entire exterior. We know someday we're going to have to replace all of these windows. So the renewal and replacement fund, in the perfect world, we would kind of match our depreciation schedule so that we're tucking away enough money over the life of the asset to make sure that we can completely replace it. The city, for the last, I looked back at the last 10 years, we did not do a good job at establishing a renewal and replacement fund. We just kind of did the bare minimum of maintenance to keep our structures from crumbling. So last year, you may remember that I put about $2 million into our renewal and replacement fund. So far this year, we've invested over $1 million of those dollars into our roads and sidewalks and a lot of the buildings that we have. We haven't spent all of it, so I'm going to add an additional $900,000 next year to keep the progress moving forward, to make sure we have enough getting stocked up in there for when we do need to make these major renovations. So there's the facility side, but then we also have the infrastructure, city infrastructure side. For city infrastructure, we can use local option gas tax funds. These funds are available to spend on operating and maintaining our transportation, and which includes not only the roads, but also the sidewalks and the lighting. We at the City of Destin have chosen to apply all of this towards actually resurfacing and restriping our roads and replacing sections of sidewalk. We are going to invest in the near future into an actual asset management software that will further help our facilities team to get better estimates. Right now, we're using national averages, and the guys they go out and they look at all the facilities and all of the roads, and that's how they're prioritizing right now. But this software will help them get more detailed and get us even better numbers. Local option gas tax number 2 is intended not for routine maintenance. This one is restricted for items that are in our comprehensive plan. So Michael and the Lewis team are talking more about how we can be investing these funds into our city to meet the things we've outlined in our comprehensive plan. Excuse me. Impact fees. Ignore the mathematical typo on here, but impact fees are monies that we collect from developers for growth necessitated improvements. We do have approximately $2.6 million in the bank accounts right now, and you'll see that I'm proposing to spend out a lot of these impact fees over the coming year. And also, have we brought forth the impact fee study? Did we bring that to the last meeting? If we didn't, then it'll be coming to a meeting soon. We spoke about it. Okay, yeah, it's been in the works. We've got the scope of work worked out, and you'll be seeing that at a meeting soon. As you well know, we do need to update our impact fee schedule because we're collecting just a small percentage from the developers. And as you know, they incorporate that back into the prices of the homes and buildings that they sell and the properties that they sell. So it's just the right thing to do. And then we have the Okaloosa half-penny surtax. The council made a motion in February 18th, yes, that was the February 18th meeting, to spend these Okaloosa half-penny monies in this particular way. Approximately $1.2 million a year is coming in over this 10-year period. So we've chosen to spend most of it on beach acquisitions, some on undergrounding, some on some public works, public safety committee initiatives, and we have some council directed projects that we can do as well. And I'm going to actually show you the bank account balances and where we're headed by the end of next year. That'll be coming up. We also have grant funding. These are some of our major grantors, the TDC, the Okaloosa County, FDEP, FDOT, Restore, which is coming to us through Okaloosa County, American Rescue Plan money, and then when we complete the harbor study, the harbor capacity study, we feel like we'll have a stronger standing to maybe access some of the Triumph Gulf Coast funds. So just another look again at the sources of money that we're going to use towards this 5-year capital budget. You'll see I highlighted the $19 million number in the last column there. That is the grant funding that either we have signed awards for or we have seen our funding earmarked. So out of this $41 million 5-year capital improvement plan, we're going to use approximately $1.5 million of unassigned general fund money. Mostly that will be used as match towards all of the grants that we're receiving. And then we're going to use about $21 million of restricted funds. Just one more thing about restricted funds. So some of these funds we restricted. We chose as a council to by resolution, restrict the use of some of the funds. Some of the funds, like the impact fees, are restricted at the state level. They tell us how we're supposed to use the money. They also tell us that some of these monies, you have to use them within a certain time period or you have to give them back. So this is another view of the grant funding for this next 5-year time period. We have just over $1 million in operating grants that's coming in. I have budgeted $19 million of other grants in this capital budget, and then we have an additional $20 million that's not necessarily flowing directly through the city. This is money that's mostly being invested by DEP to do renovations of parks. So we're not directly involved, we're indirectly guiding that process as they invest these monies.
Crystal, quick question. It says fiscal year 22 to 26 grants, but that does not mean that we're getting 424 for Leonard Destin Park every year till 26, correct?
Correct. That is actually, it's about $83,000 a year, so that's for the 5-year period. Yeah, I noticed there were some, in a shared document, some of us put in just 1 year's worth and some multiplied it out by 5 to see the full 5 years. So anyway, there's room for improvement here. Take it with a grain of salt.
No worries, thank you.
Yes. But yeah, it's just over $80,000 a year that they're giving us for operations. So here we are getting into the capital budget details, and we're starting at the top level. These are the ones that we felt are right here in this section 1 as our critical priorities named by council and citizens. We have the crosstown connector. What we have budgeted is the $2.7 million for right-of-way that has been granted to us through the DOT. Next, we have beach acquisitions. There's the third parcel at Crystal Beach that we were trying to acquire, plus, so this is the city of Destin's 41% plus the county's 59%, all combined into one. So this would cover purchasing that third property as well as doing up to $700,000 of park improvements, which will probably include things like bathrooms. Then we have, I put in some money for some studies because these other projects have come up and sound very important to people. So we need to do a feasibility study for a multi-use convention sports center. So I put $75,000 for that type of a study to be accomplished. Undergrounding, we're going to be continuing with our current project management company to refine the design and the phases and the funding going forward. And also they'll help us look for other funding opportunities to help us accomplish the construction phases.
Hold on, Crystal, real
Sure.
quick. The fiscal year 2023, the 780,000, is that in expectations of the groundwork being done and that cost of beginning the undergrounding itself?
Yes, so this is using more of the Okaloosa half-penny funding towards actually doing some procurement of some more services, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to add significantly towards the end of 2023-24. But I don't have anything signed yet. I don't have, since we don't have the opinion of probable cost yet, I don't feel comfortable putting in money that I haven't, it's just too many unknowns. But those, you'll watch those grow significantly over the coming years as we get that opinion of probable cost and we figure out how we're going to pay for it. We also put in some money here to look into a transit trolley system. I think Webb has his feelers out amongst some people working on that. The city marina, we put in $75,000 to do a feasibility study for that as well. And an annexation study. There are some enclaves within our city limits that we might be able to have them annex in without the normal long procedures. So that's money to look into that as well. Next, we have our renewal and replacement fund. So don't let these 5 or 6 buckets fool you. There are actually there are a lot of projects tucked away and hidden into here. So out in the outer years, we're just looking at estimating, just like you would like with a homeowners association. We're looking at the timing on when we need to replace certain things, and those would be the investments we need to put in. But in this coming year, that's a mix of investments we need to sock away, but most of it, these are projects we need to do next year. And this is funded mostly through gas tax, well, the RR054 for roads and sidewalks. That uses all of our gas tax number 1 money. And then we are augmenting all of this with our state half-cent sales tax money. And also, like I said, there's some prior year renewal and replacement fund balance. These projections will improve when that asset management software is deployed. I believe Michael is going to bring for the roads and sidewalks. He has sent around his list of the roads and places that he feels are in most need of resurfacing and restriping for next year. And I know that he works with his Public Works Committee.
I have a quick question. I'm looking at vehicles, the $463,000 for fiscal year 22. I know that we purchased a lot of new vehicles just this past year and replaced a lot. What exactly is that for? Like, I know we were talking about getting another dump truck and some other larger vehicles. Is that what this cost is covering those, correct?
That's correct. This includes a new dump truck, which we feel is mission critical for the city. And Michael has the detail if we need to ask him about the other vehicles.
I don't see line items. Most of the budgets, and I've reviewed a lot of them in 30 years, you have line items and you review those, and that's where you really see if the priorities are coming through, because then you can tell the difference. And we don't have last year or the year before that's budget to compare. Are we going to get those somewhere in this process?
Yes, I will be, when we have our next meetings, when we're looking together, what is it, August 4th and 5th, we'll have time to look into the details. And there are thousands of lines that I just didn't feel would help our workshop.
There are thousands of lines, but if you don't look at them, then you really don't know what's going on. Okay, thanks.
Here's our next major capital section. So these are the growth necessitated projects. So these are mostly supported by impact fees and some of the gas tax number 2 money. And then we have talked about establishing a parking fund, and I may be bringing that forward to council soon. If we did establish the parking fund, one of the first uses I'd like to use is for general parking improvements. Look at establishing a kiosk perhaps at Marlar parking lot. And then we have some parking areas that need some resurfacing, so we have that in here. And then we get to our long list of many other capital projects that didn't fall into one of the top 3 categories. Code compliance is in need of a vessel, and they can speak to that better. Next year, I'm hoping that before we have our capital project workshop, I'll have summaries for each of these projects for you that will include future year's annual operating expenses, and you'll also be able to see how we ranked and prioritized all the projects. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get all of these together for you this year, but anyway, there's always room for improvement, right? Capital Royal Melbourne, we want to make sure that we have enough money in there for any other additional change orders. For example, I think that we might need a little more funding for some irrigation for the landscaping, but those things I just want to make sure that we're able to bring that project to a successful completion. So we are budgeting a bit of money there. The 2 CRAs, so the projects that start with CR are for the 2 CRAs. We've got the Harbor CRA, CRH, and CRT is for the Town Center CRA. The 2 CRAs, we decided next year they are going to spend some money to update their master plans. That's an operating expense. And then based upon those master plans, then they will look at investing into some of these capital projects going out into the future years. So I did put in some money for general wayfinding plan signage for this coming year, for the general parts of the city of Destin. And then we have some money coming in from the Harbor CRA and from the Town Center CRA for wayfinding in the following year. So I thought we could kick it off with the general fund, let the 2 CRAs allow their bank accounts to build up a bit before we have them investing in projects. Then we have the Compass EnerGov system. There's a couple more phases that need to be completed to make that software to get the most efficiency out of it. The library, they have this grant from the IMLS to establish these tablet stations. They pulled the trigger on part of it. The next part, they're going to call the contractor in to complete that in the beginning of this next fiscal year. So that'll be, the last part of that work will be happening in the November, December, January timeframe. Then we have the NPDES program that we need to stay with, and we're using our net positive environmental benefit funds for this because this ensures the water quality and helps us meet all of those requirements. The Morgan's Children Park Playground structure needs some updating. So we're using we have a donation from the Morgan family that'll go to support some of that, and then we have some other funds that will help us complete that renovation. The Buck Destin restrooms, were not accomplished this year because we budgeted too low. We think that the price is closer to $135,000, so this is making sure we budget enough to accomplish that next year. Then we're hoping to build some pickleball courts, and here at Morgan's, we need some more restrooms. You may notice during all of our tournaments, we have to bring out a lot of additional porta potties. They just need more bathrooms there at the Morgan Center. And so we'd like to place these two side by side down at the end by the soccer fields. And we're talking with Okaloosa County to work out something with a piece of land that's lying vacant over there.
Crystal, we own the land for Morgan Sports Center, is that correct, or is it partially county?
It's owned by Destin water users, the majority of it, and we rent that for $7,500 a year.
That's
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
The term of the lease,
It's 75 years, and I think we're about 25
sorry?
years.
75.
well, that's under most circumstances considered owning. Are there any bailout clauses there? Should they ever need it, or should we decide we didn't want it? I haven't read that contract in a while.
Need to check that and get back to you on that.
Okay, well, that's another idea, another thing that we should be checking out.
Let's see, then we have, we're receiving a cultural facilities grant that we're going to use to make some improvements at the Destin Fishing Museum, and we had to match that with some of our own funds to accomplish these renovations. Clement Taylor Park, that's a grant that we have from Restore that we'll be working through the Okaloosa County to accomplish. The mobile pumps and hoses, I put that here before I knew it was all going to happen. I didn't know it was going to happen so quickly in the month of July. But, so that one might disappear because we might be accomplishing this within the next 45 days, right, Michael?
Yeah, I can order some more pumps, Crystal.
This assumes some grant funding, so if you can come up with some more grant funding, then we'll talk. And then our American Rescue Plan money, we have not yet fallen on a top 3 best ideas yet for those funds, but we have different people working on these ideas, and we'll bring those forth to council. Then the last, we have intersection safety. That's been such a hot topic this year. So we went ahead and budgeted some money to make sure that anytime we need a study at an intersection or need to add stop signs or speed bumps or anything like that, that it's budgeted already. So here's the effect on the general fund. Our net operating revenue minus expenses, the revenue by the way the state of Florida does it, they take into account all of the revenues, so all of our grant revenues as well, even though they're not necessarily operating. So the part I've shared with you here today, it shows you all of the monies after we've met our operating requirements. Then we have to remove all of these monies out, transfer them out of the general fund. So we start by transferring out the gas taxes. As you recall, those are restricted to road and sidewalk improvements. We transfer out funds for the technology fund. Then by resolution, we also transfer out all of the Okaloosa half-penny money. And then we transfer out all of the grants. We get down towards the bottom, we also transfer out money to pay our debt service on 2 of our loans, the 2 that are paid partially by the general fund monies. And then you see I'm transferring $900,000 out to the Renewal and Replacement Fund. And then last, you see the last 2 lines here, we've got the transfer out for grant match, the 1.1 million is what we would be transferring out next year. And the very last, and I highlighted this row because it's very important, for the next few years, we're going to have to be transferring money out from the general fund to subsidize our building fund. At the next meeting, and I've been saying this for a while now, but really truly at the next meeting, I'll be bringing forth more information about this building fund. We were supposed to set this up by Florida statute a few years back. I think it was supposed to go into effect in January of 2019. So we're a few years behind on that. So I took the revenues minus the expenditures for the last few years, and I came up with a fund balance, and we need to establish this. The Florida statute says that our building permit fees are supposed to cover our the cost to enforce Florida building code. And as you can see right here, this highlighted line, this is how much we are going into the negative. We're not covering our costs with our current fee schedule. So that's why Lance was mentioning earlier when we were going through our strategic plan. That's why I'm prioritizing the building permit fees. When we get the building permit fees updated, we should be able to recoup all of this. All of these funds should flow back in, and we can establish a proper reserve for the building fund. So we will be looking at that in the very near future. I also wanted to point out, the reason I highlighted this is if you look into the future years, you're going to see that we actually have a decrease in fund balance each year. And for the years from 2023 out to the future, you'll see that it would be an increase to fund balance instead of a decrease if only our building fund was paying for itself like it's supposed to. So when we fix that, then we should be back in the black, and we should be improving. On the next page, I'm going to talk about the actual fund balance.
So real quick before we go on the increase and decrease in fund balance, you're saying this is all current, but when we do get this building fund set up and in order, we'll be able to populate that money into there, so these will not be in the decrease, they'll be in the plus.
Correct.
Okay.
If I might just, the picture's probably a little more nuanced than that. The building funds are down because we are issuing fewer building permits, the same amount of building permits? Do we know the answer to that question?
No, actually,
Well, I understand that's the allegation, but if we
yeah,
are
shockingly, we have our year-to-date plus my projections out to the end of the year, we're going to bring in over $800,000 this year in building permit revenues, which is higher than in the previous years. The difference between the previous years and now is that never in the life of the city have we fully allocated out all of the costs of the building fund to the building fund. So I've been working on the team doing some better management accounting. So for example, a third of this building, the insurance for a third of this building should have been applied to the building fund. The insurance on the inspector's vehicles should have been applied to the building fund. All of the software licenses for all of the people from Microsoft to EnerGov to Outlook to all of these different softwares we use, all of the telephones, all of the cell phones, all of those expenditures should have been charged to the building fund, but they haven't. They didn't take the time to allocate these things out in past years. So I've set those.
And that's somewhat the point I'm making, is the solution to the problem is not a knee-jerk, we need to charge more for building permits, although we probably do. It's a little more complicated than that, and if we do the accounting right, and if we actually issue more building permits, then we may fix the problem without dramatically increasing the cost of building permits, which is the simple knee-jerk fix to the problem, and we want to remember that.
Well, yeah, part of it is that we're looking at the expenditures, but the thing with the Florida Building Code, you're correct, there's always two sides of the equation. We can decrease expenses or we can increase revenues, right? How are we going to find this balance? But when you're talking about enforcing Florida Building Code, we have time constraints on us. If we don't meet those time constraints, then they start charging fees on us. So it's really hard to reduce the expenditure side. So when you look at it, and that's why you have specialists come in who are specialized in rates for Florida Building Code enforcement. These are people who can build up the cases that would pass in front of a in front of a magistrate or whatever the venue is. Those are the people that we need to bring in, and that's an expensive study. But we have to do it.
And that's true, but it's also true over the last year. As we tried to implement the EnerGov and some of the other things, our time to issue a permit has been absolutely horrible. And therefore,
That's true.
logic tells us we didn't issue nearly as many permits as we should have. as we go forward, that should be better, so the revenue side should come up. I'm
Right.
not going to make the arguments that the people that are in this business are going to make, rather than just say, okay, let's jack the fees way up, and then we're going to fix it that way. That shouldn't be the only way to fix it.
Right, and it's not really fair to all of the citizens of Destin to have ad valorem subsidizing it either. So yeah, I think we need to look at maybe even a reorganization. I think part of the issue with our building permit fees is that they're overly complex. So even in times when we have high volume, we can't simply call in a contractor to help us get caught up because our schedules are just too complex. That would be part of what needs to be fixed. EnerGov was a little baby step in the right direction. Now it's time to do the bigger step to simplify, be more transparent with our citizens as well.
Yeah, and this isn't necessarily budget related, but what, and this may be the wrong time to talk about this, but are we doing anything to make sure we're issuing building permits faster? I mean, I know that, like I said, that it's maybe not the time or place for it, but like you said, if we can get permits out faster, we don't have to jack the prices up for local contractors.
Right, and I think another part of the equation that you're kind of mentioning is that, when the process is too difficult and it's not transparent enough, I think a lot of people just simply don't come forward. And so we're not able to, do the proper inspections, we're not able to keep everybody safe. And so, yeah, it's all related. But yes, the community development and the building inspection group, they've been working really hard to get all of the positions filled and everybody trained. They've been working really hard to get caught up. And I hear the whole department, not just the building inspectors, all of the people, they're all involved. They're all taking on pieces, even though it's not in their job descriptions to do so, trying to get caught up.
I'm hearing it from the contractors. So
Yeah.
that's why.
Yep, we hear it, I think, at every meeting, don't we?
And I think truly most contractors don't mind paying more. If the system would be expedited, they probably would love to pay more. Maybe not love, but they will.
They'd rather pay more than wait longer.
Yeah,
Yeah, we are,
we're going to have to work on both sides of that.
if I may, we are seeing a change. Anyone who is applying it with the new system, things are a whole lot more faster than they used to be.
After all, you promised you were going to have this fixed in 2 months, right?
Yeah, right. But we still have folks that are kind of like in that limbo area where they applied before the system changed over, and those are the ones that we're trying to get over to the new system. So those, clearly, there's going to be time for all that information to be in the new system. But anyone applying currently today in the new system, they're out of here within days. Yes, absolutely.
So here we are on the next page. This is the effect on the total fund balance of the city. So because we're using a lot of restricted money, the effect on our unassigned fund balance is really not that significant. So at the top of this page, we start off with all of our restricted money. So you can see that the restricted fund balance, and I think we did mention we will have an impact fee study going pretty soon here. And my projections for impact fee revenues are incredibly conservative. Bottom line, you can see here that our restricted funds are still increasing at a slight rate, despite all the money that I'm, planning to spend. Are committed, which is, committed means things that council, we've passed a resolution and we said we're going to commit these funds. So under committed, that 2 million and the 6 million, so that that's about $9 million. That's basically our core reserve that we don't touch. It's invested in super safe securities, and we're not, or treasuries, and we're not going to touch that. Then we've also, I'm assuming pretty soon that we're going to do a resolution to restrict or commit the parking fund money. So this would be all of our parking revenues, and we'll be bringing some verbiage forward on exactly how we would like to spend those proceeds. The tech fund is something that's been in our fee schedule for a number of years now, where we decided that certain types of permits, we tacked on a little bit of a surcharge there to replenish our technology fund so that we could have programs like the EnerGov come in and reduce some of the stress there. And then the Okaloosa half penny fund as well. So as you can see, I'll be keeping a balance in the Okaloosa half penny fund as we go out up till 2026. Then we really take a nice dip into that bucket. On any given day, we tend to have about $1 million in open encumbrances, promises out to our contractors, which brings us down to the unassigned fund balance. And as you can see, I've tried really hard to keep this above $5 million a year, but you as council members need to be aware that we have this unassigned fund balance. There are different things you can do with this. You can choose as a council to keep more of it as restricted, to use only in case of emergency. Or you can choose to dip into this in the event of certain critical programs like the undergrounding program. We might need to dip into there a little bit. But that's you just need to be aware of what this is. And now we get to the good piece. So the last two slides, this is all of the projects, and I added a column here that hopefully matches each of these sections where I found it on our draft poster. So for example, the Crosstown Connector, we listed that as item 1.2, and on the draft budget or the draft strategic poster, that's where I got the 1.2 as the priority. So this slide and the next slide, these two are the slides that have all of our priorities according to the poster and all of the funding that we're planning on spending over the next 2 years. And this is where I would really like to hear your input and your thoughts on how we are planning on spending these funds over the next 2 years.
I don't see 1.1.
Oh, right, because 1.1 is offer livable wages and benefits, and that's not a capital project, that's operating. And by the way, the operating budget that I used, this effect on total fund balance, this incorporates both the operating and the capital budgets all into one place so that we can see the effect on the total city fund balance. This budget, where I came to get this effect on total balance, and also the page before it, the effect on the general fund, where you see our net revenues minus expenditures. This assumes that we're going to do right by all of our people, hopefully effective. I think we've been talking about June 12th of this year, but we're still waiting for the study to come back from the consultant, Mr. Ling.
And that would also incorporate adding into a Christmas bonus onto the effect as well, right?
We put that in, and then we're having legal double check into the verbiage and exactly the type of policy we could write to allow that type of thing.
So just on that, we are working on that. We are just, we've tried to get up with our labor attorney, Rob Larkin, and he is looking at it, and we'll get back to us hopefully this week or next.
It's just, I want to make sure that we continue to keep our people first, because we're struggling as a city because our people are leaving. And if we can't pay them right and keep the right people, that's why I wanted to make sure that is not here. Where is it? Okay, thank you.
And I agree with you, Teresa, but that's a very, very small part of the big part, because that's a small grant and it's theoretically one time, although we give it every year. We don't have to find our reoccurring resources for that. Elsewhere in this budget, and I'm sure you'll get to it or have gotten to it, is where we figure out where we're going to get the rather large chunk of money that we're going to have every year to implement the kind of raises that Teresa's talking about we need. And that's where the real question is. And the other thing, I see that on the 17th, we're doing tentative millage rate. The figures you have here are based on what millage rate?
Yeah, this is all assuming we keep our existing millage rate, that there's no change.
Thanks.
Yeah, and just to, just take this home and think about it, but this effect on general fund, really, this is showing you the net, our net operating. And the further out you go into the years, I only have grants coming in the first 2 years. After that, that really is our net, the revenues minus the expenditures. So that's the top line of this. And again, out in those future years, if we correct our building fund, then we should be adding money again to bottom line. And this also, I did not include the franchise, the change in the franchise agreement because it hasn't been signed yet. So I'm assuming we continue with the current 4%. Yes, it would. Right. So let's just look through these a little bit, the projects, and compare them to the posters, if you don't mind. And I would really like to hear back from you, looking at the poster and looking at how we've budgeted the numbers, and just to hear your feedback on, do you think we captured the gist of what you've talked about at the last budget meeting and at the January strategic planning session? I'd just like to hear your thoughts at this moment.
I have lots of stuff. Okay, so I guess to start with, one of my thoughts is we were supposed to get some funding from TDC last year, and because of COVID, that was not allocated. Have you determined whether we are going to be receiving that this year?
We receive a lot of funding from TDC, so I was wondering, did you have something in particular?
I believe it was for spring break in particular and additional officers.
The TDC has a certain maximum amount that is allowed to spend on law enforcement each year, and I believe we received the full amount.
They finally agreed that there was an additional 10%, and they had agreed at one point that we would get that funding. But then when COVID came, they didn't approve any additional funding to be sent back out. So
Yeah, I do know that the award for our waterfront and beach, like the cleaning and our maintenance of these areas, that increased this year. And I do believe they are directly funding the fire department for additional lifeguards during certain times of the year. But Jeffrey, are you here? Can you speak to that?
Yes, I'd be glad to. They are in the proposed fiscal year budget for next year for the TDC. There is additional funding, not to go through us, but for lifeguards in Noriega Point. So, and I think that's over $100,000. So is that what you were referring to?
No, it was extra funding to cover the costs of bringing extra law enforcement in for spring break.
Well, I think you're talking about the 10% allowable authorized use for that funding that can be spent essentially on special events like first responders and that kind of stuff, right? I remember this
Well, it's
being
an
addressed
additional
before.
10% that can't supplant what they were already,
And I believe that the county did tell us that we could, in fact, apply for that. And I think you're right. I think they said that because of the unexpected impacts of COVID, we're not making any budget changes at this time, but we can look into that again. So yeah, I think we can look at that, and we'll see if that is something we can hopefully get.
Yeah, I'm just looking at more things to possibly bring in to help us fund. The other thing I thought was interesting was the article in the paper the other day from the PAWS director, who was talking about the numbers and based on cities and calls that Destin should actually be paying half what they're paying and Crestview should be paying double what they are paying. And I thought that was sort of an interesting point for us to latch onto. If even the director is saying that, we certainly should be saying that and seeking, I guess, equity, if you will, within what we're paying versus what everyone else is paying based on calls. So again, those are just some off the top of my head thoughts I had regarding sources of potential extra income or revenue, I guess as we would call it. I have a question, and I guess part of it is a lot of what I'm seeing on our poster, I guess as you're calling it, is objectives that tend to be more of a benefit to our visitors rather than directly to our residents. In many cases, of course, the citizens would benefit almost incidentally. And one of the things I'd really like to encourage is us to look at funding items that really do benefit directly our citizens. And I would argue one of those, of course, is Crosstown Connector we've got on here, because that's a road that we'll all be using. But in addition to that, looking at things like annexation would only help us bringing in more funding. Joe's Bayou. We had talked at one point about the right-of-way improvements here off the bayou, here off the bay, different things that would benefit residents that live here rather than tourists that come in because they don't know there's access to a waterfront back off Harbor Lane or whatever. So I really was thinking quite a bit about making sure that, you know, certainly we do need to address issues that benefit everyone, such as infrastructure, traffic, the transit and everything, but I want to make sure that we are including things that, you know, really look out for our residents. So I'm sort of starting off with that thought. I would like to have seen more beautification elements on here. I do see the median as 4.9. I don't really see anything additional funding unless I missed it or it's lumped in with something else, but landscaping, holiday decorations, linear trail, things that really beautify the city. I mean, we're the ones that see it year-round, and again, that's something that benefits everyone, but it really does improve everything overall. Let's see, what were my other thoughts here? Pickleball courts, I did see that in there as part of OCP. That was $400K, I guess, budgeted for this year. So I guess we don't need to push any more on pickleball since that is in there. But that's sort of my thoughts starting off today, just to sort of get the conversation going. Linear trail was one of the objectives somewhere, but I do not, 4.15, but I kind of lumped that in with city beautification as well, but I don't, again, we didn't really budget for landscape overall, beautification of the city overall. And you know, with the beach acquisition, that's something we're in for, right? And that's, I guess, utilizing the monies that we have to pay for what we're already contracted. Or am I wrong? Is that looking at additional properties as well?
No, what's
Okay.
budgeted for next year is just what's been already agreed upon.
Okay. So that's sort of my thoughts starting off.
And Dr. Ramswell, just a point of clarification too, we did budget for some holiday decorations in this budget. It may have not made the highlights, but we do have some money in there, which is new for us. And then we do also have some money going to the linear trail study to kick that off this
No, that's for
this
next year.
2 years. Okay.
Yeah, so we're going to start off with the town center CRA area for the linear trail. As I mentioned, this year, we would like them to focus on updating their master plan. And then next year, they have money to do to get like an engineer's opinion of probable cost. And then they would go out to bid each of these sections. The trail in total is going to cost, just going to shoot from the hip, it's over $15 million. And the sections, we've tried to bite it off in like $1 million sections. Some of them are easy. Some of them are more difficult because we're going over a bit of water and swampy areas as well. So the different sections have different costs, but we want the engineer's opinion of probable cost to take out to go to bid. And the CRAs right now, they need to build up their funding first before they can put their money towards these.
Is what you're envisioning or staff is envisioning, is it similar to the linear trail? I guess they don't call it that, but in Destiny East, I don't know if y'all have ever seen it. I know Mr. Bagby's aware of what I'm talking about, but is that sort of what the thought is and the expectation of what it would look like in the future once complete?
I've been involved with this one for many, many years, so my vision of it, and this came to the Parks and Rec Committee, gosh, 10 years ago maybe. But it was a type of multi-use trail for jogging, biking, walking, and provide an alternate means of getting across town. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, I didn't know if you'd seen it. It's really beautiful the way it's done over there in Destiny East. If you haven't seen it, I encourage you to, well, I don't know, I mean, it is a gated community, but gates are open half the time, but it is a beautiful little linear park, and I would like to see a sort of model after that moving forward. But, you know, I'm harping on this, but I really do want to see more beautification, more community-based things that really benefit our residents and make Destin a more attractive, beautiful place to live, because we've gotten so caught up in all the traffic and the needs for infrastructure, which certainly are priorities, that I think we've kind of let slip our overall aesthetic and overall look. So,
Real quick, sorry, I hope I didn't cut you off. I just want to echo what you're saying. I mean, was born and raised here and have seen every phase of development in the last 35 years, and it seems like, for the most part, we really side with what brings the most people here, what brings the most money here, and what you see a lot of. I mean, it seems like to me, and what I'm hearing from people in the community, is that, man, we really focus a lot on tourism, you know, and I'd echo what you say. I'd like to see it. I'd like to see us put a little more stock in, you know, what local folks would like to see.
and you know what I noticed is in this budget somewhere, the pond park thing that you had suggested off the connector, it is a line item in here, but there's nothing allocated towards it at this time. So I was happy to see that.
Me too.
Yeah, we don't want to lose track of it. It's a really cool idea. I just need to find the right funding, and I think as we get a little bit further along with our crosstown connector, we'll have kind of a better idea.
I noticed that you skipped over that one, that and the vehicle wash, but
Do you like
I
the
saw
name?
it.
Do you like our name for it?
I love it.
Well, I'll go next, and thank you, Dr. Ramswell. She pretty much hit on exactly my thoughts. You've done a great job. The budget is very close and in line, and it's hitting everything that we want to get done. But, you know, I don't want to just put up 5 Christmas decorations. I mean, I want people to feel Christmassy like they do when they're driving through some of the cities to get here. You know, the amount of money that's spent to bring tourists here at Christmas time. I mean, I love Christmas time. I think Christmas lights just gives a good feeling. I mean, so I tell people, if you don't see enough on 98, come down by my house. It's pretty well lit up. So I think she hit it all on the head, just our landscaping and making it more of an appealing city year-round for all of us that live here, not just during the high peak tourist times. But I told you last week when we talked, I'm so very thankful that you are such a guru with this budget and have done such a fine job of lining it out. And like Mr. Destin, I'd like to see the line items, because I know there's a ton of information that, you know, people really don't know what's really coming up and what's been going out without all of that. So thank you for what you've done, and thank you for helping us continue to move this along. That's all I have.
And you have done a very rational, measured budget here, and I appreciate that. Back, tell me, R&R, this is the first year we've done that. Obviously, there was some R&R, although very, very vague in the last 30 years, because we did fix roofs and we did do the things that we had to do. The question is, in my mind, is what you have in here much more ambitious than that, or about the same as that, or below that? And that question is hard to get your arms around, since we didn't have an R&R. It was just swapped into the general revenue, I suppose. and when it was needed, it was used. We had no idea how much we were spending percentage-wise. So I like the concept. I am a little curious about how it compares to what we've spent in the past. And I reemphasize, without a line item budget, both what we're proposing and what we have been doing, it's hard to go through and say, yep, this line went down, this line went up, and those are where the real priorities of the spending are. And until I've got that to look at, it's hard for me to give you a whole lot of direction, because other than the 10,000 overhead view of that's on this flyer, I don't really know. What's on the flyer looks pretty good, but the devil's in the details. And so we need that before we go a whole lot further.
Here, I can just speak to the R&R a little bit. It looked to me, I looked at the last 10 years of data. Last year, in 2020, there was budgeted $40,000 into the Renewal and Replacement Fund. The national guidelines that Michael likes to bring forward, nationwide, I think it's like $50 per square foot to maintain most commercial buildings. And that's low, that's correct. So what Michael's been doing with this Renewal and Replacement Fund is he's actually looking at, well, this this building has 7 HVAC units. Each HVAC unit costs approximately this much. We need to be replacing one. An HVAC unit in this area of Florida tends to have a life of approximately 7 years. So as long as we're budgeting to change one out every 7 years or so, then we're replacing them ahead of schedule. Another thing I can tell you about renewal and replacement funds is if we were to go out for bonds, if we were going to go to, out onto the big bond market, they would want to see that we have a proper renewal and replacement fund. They want to see that we have, that's why I feel strongly about investing into this asset management software, because part of it is just showing that we have a good track record, that we're doing preventative maintenance instead of curative maintenance. This helps bring our bond rates lower so that the city can borrow funds at lower rates. So this is just a start. We have a lot of refining to do. There's a lot of underlying detail that needs perfective. Yeah, no, I don't think that the asset management software we're looking at will cost nearly that much. There's a lot of, in the IT has a lot of different softwares that they're going to be investing in, and that's just one of them. We also need to update our RecTrack software for where we rent out all of the fields and pavilions for the park and rec. That is broken down in the line items. There's like 99 particular line items that got smashed down into the 44 that fit into a presentation.
I have one other question, and it's about the multi-use convention sports community center. I know that the one location that had been discussed, unless there's another one, I spoke with the property manager today, and they are about to close on, obviously, someone else purchasing that. So we might have another $75K unless there's some other piece of property they know of that's going to accommodate that wish. So.
A couple of them are.
Any other comments from, oh yes.
Real quick, that place is under contract?
They're under contract and supposed to close next week. They're doing some final negotiations.
Okay. This was just a quick thought, and Crystal, I'm sure you covered this, and I may have been absent-minded on it. And I know critical priorities 1.1, offer livable wages and benefits to attract and maintain high caliber qualified staff. I think my question goes back to kind of the Dr. Ramswell's argument, and that, correct me where I'm wrong. It seemed like we focused a lot on this budget on a whole lot of other things. What do we have a plan to execute objective 1.1?
Yeah, we have a consultant, a wage study consultant who's working on the plan right now. He's updating the plan that he did recently, so.
You said that. Sorry, that's my fault.
No
Thank you.
problem. Okay, so next steps. At this coming July 19th meeting, next Monday, we need to adopt our tentative millage rate because I have to certify that to the property appraiser in time for them to get that rate out on the trim notices to all of the citizens. So now is a chance also to, in my opinion, the rate that we have, it's funding our most of our projects that we really want to do. It's properly funding our general fund and the increases in wages that we would like to do. So I personally don't see any reason to increase it. Decreasing it every 1/10 of a mil, just to remind you, is worth about $585,000. And as you can see, that's another reason I put this effect on fund balance, on general fund here, just so that you can see the bottom line is next year, between all of our projects, I'm going to be dipping into our fund balance by $1 million. And in future years, I'm going to be dipping in, $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 until we get our building fund set up and going properly. So just putting that out there. I know a lot of years, we're government and we don't want to be overtaxing people. Different councils have different opinions on how you do that. Different councils have different opinions on what your reserve balances should be. There are a lot of different concepts as well when you come to taxation on trying to match benefits to the citizens that you have. So that's one reason why governments prefer to keep their ad valorem at the minimum possible rate, because you don't want to be collecting a bunch of money from this generation and then saving it up and not spending it until 20 years down the road on a totally different generation, right? So there are just all of these different philosophies, but that's for you as council members, that's for you guys to decide what is your philosophy. Where do you feel comfortable? We want to make sure that the city has proper reserves in case something dramatic happens. And yet we need to balance that with, with the rates that we charge people to live in the city and what are we giving back to them when we charge them these fees and taxes.
What is our current millage rate?
1.615.
615. I mean, I'm
We make a
comfortable where
vote?
it is. Not tonight,
No,
not tonight.
It's not a vote. We'll be bringing forth it's in the format of a resolution, right? Or is it
For the tentative,
the tentative?
we can just do that by motion, or we can do it by resolution, either way.
And then we'll go through the 2 public hearings in September, and that's where you will adopt it as ordinance at public hearing number 1, and then you'll adopt it again as ordinance at public hearing number 2, and that's where it goes in and becomes ordinance. So after July 19th, we can decrease our millage rate, but we cannot increase it.
Yes, I was going to point that out also. If we do not go to the rollback rate, it will be advertised as a tax increase.
That's correct.
So if we leave it exactly like it is, it'll be advertised as a tax increase, although we are not raising the millage, and we can blame it all on that guy over at the property appraiser's office.
That's correct. So any last thoughts or comments about what's coming up? And I understand you'd all like to dive deeper into the details, so I do recommend you schedule time with me to do that. That's correct.
Do we want to ask for public comment? You have nothing to say? I'm shocked. This is one of your areas of expertise, isn't it?
No, and I appreciate that shout out. It is one of the areas that I try to focus on is Jim Bagby, 4709 C Star Vista. I'll give you the code to Destin East if you want to come see the path. It is, feed the pig, because I did have the little budget pig. But I think Crystal's done a great job. I'm kind of like Mr. Destin. I like the big binders where I can go through and I can look at every expenditure and spend, a weekend just going, well, that number doesn't match what you told me over on page 2 or whatever, just because that's how. But I think y'all are doing a great job. I think you've got the right priorities. I really want to see, 1.1 is 1.1 for a reason, and we got a plan, but this is the capital budget, so it's not really something you discussed during the capital budget. So I understand that. And I think y'all are moving forward on the priorities that you set. So, I had some questions, but I tend to ask my budget questions of the finance director unless I don't like the answer I get from the finance director. And then I ask them from this podium. Okay, thank y'all.
Sometimes.
Operational side of this, we do have a line item budget on that too. And we certainly need to look at that. All right.
Could I jump in for just a quick second? I want to thank Crystal for all of her efforts on putting this together, and I want to take whatever responsibility I need to for her changing some of the formatting, because in the long run, I think we're going to actually get much more usable information. And so when you're getting that detailed information that you're all after, understand that we may lose some of our 3-year trending information, that generally you get 3 years and you've got the trending information you want. But in order to get some of this stuff really being charged to the right buckets where it needs to go so we can make real good decisions, I have asked her to kind of tear into it. And at some point you just have to make the decision. You're going to rip the bandage off and go for it and correct some. I'm not saying anybody was doing anything wrong. It's just we wanted to do it in a different manner to give us better information. So she's done a great job of doing that. So we will lose a little bit of the trending information, but only for a couple of years, and then we'll be right back in it, and then we'll have much better trending information. So I hope that makes sense. I just wanted to take the heat for that one.
Yeah, thank you, Lance. No, that's a really good point. Like I mentioned, we're doing a lot better in allocating our costs out this year than we've ever been with the city, and that's only going to improve as we keep going forward in the future. I told Lance when I started here last year that, accountants, we hate change. We want to be able to compare year over year over year. We don't like changing. We don't like changing up the chart of accounts. The state of Florida came out with a new account code book last year, so I had to change a number of accounts so that I can report directly up to the state of Florida like I'm supposed to. We also, as you noticed, I had to do better on allocating out expenses to the building fund, but why just do it just to the building fund? I also need to know to track better for code compliance and for all of these other departments. So when you look at the trend year over year, we have so many new funds now because we're restricting a lot more money, but there were some, call them organizational units, that they really didn't have a lot of meaning and purpose, and they were just kind of overcomplicating things, so I've merged them. For example, Parks and Outdoor Rec have now been merged into one organizational unit. Clerk's office and administrative have now been merged into one. So you're going to look at these organizational totals across the years, and you're going to say, oh, last year it was 100,000, this year it's 200, why is that? Well, it's because I merged two of the organizational units together. Or another one like Human Resources and Risk Management, it's been about $400,000 year over year, now it's dropping down to 200,000, because I've taken out 200,000 and I applied it down to public safety and to other categories, Parks and Rec, where if we didn't have those facilities, we wouldn't have those costs. So we're getting better at allocating those out. So just, keep that in the back of your mind. There's been an awful lot of change. I'm trying to get it all done this year so that for the next 30 years, we will be able to compare year over year and not have these types of massive changes, because they're, it's comparability is important.
Very good, and you'll be able to explain that to us as we meet with you, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thanks.